Hi y'all, Jeff here with Jeff's Cars and Garage, and welcome back to another video. And as you can see, I'm back in my garage. The plants are gone for now. She might be doing another one of them sales in a couple months, maybe. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about some automobiles, primarily Mercedes-Benz. And I'm not going to use, I don't have any scripts. I'm not reading an article, but I am going to talk about some of the Mercedes automobile that I believe are, the more reliable ones, better quality. I'm going to go back a couple of decades. And you're going to see some common threads in there, but excuse me. But if you're looking for, if you're going to go be out buying a, let's say, a 5-year-old used car, and you want a Mercedes automobile, probably want to look into maybe the E-Class, and more specifically the E300 in the 2020s era. They seem to have, you get a lot of technology in them, but you also get, it just seems to me that the E-Class, or at least in the E-Class series, is the one that has better fit and finish. And probably, the engines and things like that now are, there's more, the engines are smaller, but they're also turbocharged. And Mercedes, I believe, has done a pretty good job in that E-Class era, of probably doing it justice and the value of it. Now, they're going to cost you a little bit more than some of the other classes, and the depreciation when you buy them new isn't quite as much as it is in some of the other classes. So I would probably go, E300, E300, E350, something in that era, in that range. In the SUV, again, I would probably be more apt to go with the E-Class, the GLE. Well, they're G-Class, but it would be the GLE. I probably would stay away from the GLA and the GLB. They're inexpensive. They were designed, for they're budget minded. But you get to the GLE, you get more options. You get more technology. You do have, once you get into the 2020s. You've got screens and you've got screens, and so you're always at risk of the failure of the technology, but especially over time. The GLS, I probably in the 2020s. I don't know a lot about them. They're They are problematic because, again, they have more technology, and they're a little bit larger. You've got the room, but for a value, I would say that they're probably they lose their depreciation now. 5 years old, I probably wait until they're about 6 or 7 years old. Because they really depreciate very heavily. But the GLE, again, holds its value a little bit longer. It's right in that mid-size era, and it just seems like Mercedes-Benz does a pretty good job of building that. As far as the S-Class car in the Mercedes, there's no value because they depreciate very rapidly in the first 5 years. Um, so for that's my opinion for the 2020s, the GLE SUV and the E-Class sedan. Now, let's go back to the 2010s to 20 through 2019. Now you're going to get some value by looking at the GLS. The GLS 5, I believe you're in that area. You're going to be the 450, 550. Obviously, like I have the GL350, the diesel. Now, I don't recommend the diesel unless you're really willing to go the extra mile and changing, getting your fluids and things changed, the maintenance side of things. I probably wouldn't look at one with over 150, 160,000 miles on it if you're buying used. But if you find a fairly decent low mile one and you can get the service records like I did, I would probably entertain another GL350 diesel. Two things about that vehicle is they get great fuel economy. They're phenomenal on the highway as far as fuel efficiency. The GLS, the gas models, however, are the opposite. They get roughly around 16, 17 miles to gallon on the highway, but they still have all the comforts. I mean, they are an S class of the SUVs. Again, all of these vehicles, you got to do your maintenance when recommended and things like that. But as far as the build quality, not too bad. Mercedes did a pretty good job. The GLE version in that time period, again, that's probably a little bit better to have it. But again, Mercedes, really the one that they've done the best on, especially in this era, is the ML. The MLs have done a great job if you want an SUV. It just doesn't have the third row seat. But the ML series, the ML350, the ML, I guess it would be the ML350 and the ML500 in the AMG version are phenomenal vehicles. They do have, again, a little bit of electronic issues, but they really do, they've been a very good car, and they're a kind of a sleeper when it comes to when you're finding them. You just don't find them, and so especially on used car lots. If you do, they're going to be some on those second-rate car lots. They won't be on. They'll be dealer trade-ins, but then the dealers, the new car dealers will ship them off to the auction, and then they end up at this basically the second-hand car lot. So that's another one in that era that I would consider. And again, for the sedan, E-Class all the way, and especially in this era, I would consider I would probably be more apt to go with the EL3 or the E-Class E350. That 3.5 liter engine from Mercedes has been probably the most reliable that I know of in the history of Mercedes-Benz, short of the original 3-liter diesel back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But as far as the modern day Mercedes, I would go. That would be the car I would have. You don't have the performance of the E500. That one has got phenomenal performance, but you have enough performance to get you out on the highway. But it just is a reliable engine. It's a 250, 300,000 mile engine. If you take care of that, and then again, also in this same era, in the teens, if it's still available, I believe it was, would have been the C class with the 3.5 liter. So E-Class, C class, both of those would be my picks if you were looking for a sedan. The C300 in this era isn't bad. It's on the same the engine is still the same platform, but I want a little bit more ride, a little more comfort, a little more space. The E350 would be again my choice. Now let's go back. Let's go back to the next era. We were doing the 2020s. Now we're 2010s. Let's do the 2000s. This is a tough era. This was a tough era for Mercedes because they were trying to get into the large SUVs right at the tail end, and they had another class out that was kind of a sleeper, but didn't really perform well in the United States, and that's the R class. The R class was remarkably a good vehicle. I've owned one. I've owned an R350. Again, electronics seemed to be an issue, and that the head unit went out in mine, or was going out. But ride and durability of the vehicle, oh my goodness! Everybody that drove that, in fact, Tom, from my previous channel, the Idiot Car Guys, he drove that. He said it was phenomenal. Jose, he and my daughter Madison had borrowed it, and they said, "My gosh, this thing just rides great." And in the snow in the wintertime, it was that particular 4MATIC setup for some reason performed better than the 4MATIC in the GL series or in the ML series. Don't know why. It's probably the weight distribution of the vehicle. It also had third row seats. It had the panoramic sunroof. If it got that, it just had everything that an SUV, but it kind of looked like a minivan, and it looked like the Chrysler Pacifica and things like that, because there was some Chrysler Dodge influence during that time period. Wasn't well received because it was in that category that flopped. But great vehicle. You don't find a lot of them used. I watch and I see them every once in a while on Marketplace. And again, the 350, the R350 would be my choice in that particular one, especially, since it has that 3.5 liter. Okay, now, again, I'm going to go back to, in that same time period, C350 and E350, same thing. Again, it's the engine. Those are 250,000 mile engines if you take very good care of them. Electronics, again, always been an issue. Interiors on the C class during this time period were not quite as good. More, not padded plastic. It was just straight plastic. They didn't do the padded plastics until the 2010s and the mid 2010s. They went with the back to the padded dashes. So they were just molded plastic and stuck in there. So they were an inexpensive car. But these cars right now, you could probably pick up a good C350 or an E350 for less than $5,000. It'll probably have 150,000 miles on it, but that would be get you a good car. Now, and it'd be reliable, especially if you're a college student, or just a young person that needed a car to drive for as a daily driver. It's in the era of obviously the Ford Fusion and various different cars during that time period, but that would be my choice. Now, as far as the S class during this period, until you get to 2007, the S class was it was horrible. There's several things, and I believe that was the W220. Anyway, whichever, and I'll have to just verify that, but I do know from 99 or 2000 to 2006, that version of the S class, in my opinion, think that was probably one of the worst S classes Mercedes ever has done. Two things. Number one, it did not have driver convenience, and these cars you can get for cheap. The S500, however, the engine's great. The transmission's great. The all-wheel drive systems on the 4MATICs, great. The problem is the driver convenience. The power window switches were way down on the door. Just was not very convenient. You know, this is the time period where you got out of the W140 into the W220, and the power window switches were in the middle console. They moved them to the door, and they put them too low. It was great if you're short, but if you're a short person, seats coming up and seats going forward, and now they're way too low for you. Just the wrong, just with the design for driver and passenger comfort convenience was just wrong. Style-wise, great car. The V12, V12K, was out in this time period as well. Very hard to work on because it was a very tight engine compartment, but the V12 was actually improved from the W140 and the R129 and did a better job in the 220. So I would probably say stay away from the S-Class, wait till the next era. And I wouldn't do the 2007. I would wait because the bugs didn't get worked out until 2008. And that was the 221. All right, now we're down to the 90s. W140 S-Class. I just talked about that a little bit. I would probably stay away from them. I've owned one. The S500 was a challenge in the early years. The instrument cluster was an issue. You had a lot of instrument cluster issues. You had in the center stack. You had electronic issues. The radios were problematic. Most people changed them out and put aftermarket radios in. Climate controls were an issue in the earlier years. I'm not sure about the later years because they had so many vacuum actuated blend doors that controlled everything, and unless you know how to chase the vacuum system, it was all up underneath here. And in my S500 and my W140, I was constantly changing the electronic. There was a electronic box in there. It'd get heated up, and I'd have to change it about every summer. Even Tom, when I sold the car to him, he had to change it. Now, excuse me, would I own another one? Yes, I would. I like the car. I like the style of the car. A lot of people do like the car. Right now, prices on these cars are all over the place. I've seen them in my area here, with just right over 100,000 miles, and they're selling for $8,000 to $12,000. Is that car worth that? No, it's not, because the hydraulic rear suspension, well, it's a four-wheel hydraulic suspension system coming from the 126, where that was just rear on the 560. The hydraulic suspension system, you have to replace those accumulators probably about every 80,000 miles because they leak. And the diaphragm in there goes bad. Not an expensive part to replace by no means, but it's getting constant. Now the parts are going to get worse and worse as time moves on to be the availability as far as the parts. But style-wise of the car, it was probably ahead of its time. It was probably the heaviest S-Class built. It was coming out of the W126 era, where that was the dignitary era. But reliability, no. You got to put a lot of work into it. As far as the engine, yes, it's fine. In transmission, it's fine. But that's the 500. The 320, S320 during that area in the W140, underpowered, slow to get going. Good engine, but it just wasn't. Probably wasn't the best engine transmission matchup for the weight of the car. E-classes during this time period this is where they were coming out, and this was probably the best, again, a good era for E-class, and this was the W124s. Yes, W124. Solid cars, very well constructed. The 3-liter, the inline 3-liter 6-cylinder was the early one. Then they went to the dual overhead cam, M104. Yeah, it was the M103 first and an M104 engine. The M104 engine in its early years, as I've got one of the early ones with my SL3 or 300 SL, challenging engine because they used it in a lot of different cars, and they were always had a hard start issue, and I've had two of them that have had hard start issues. It's just not, you get past that, and your true Mercedes mechanics are probably ones that can work on them and make them right and make them last longer. I'm just not talented enough to do that, but it's also costly. But E-Class during this time period, phenomenal. R129 is during this time period. I like the styling of them. Are they reliable? Yeah, they are. Personally, I would like to have the V12, except it's a little challenging to work on because you're stuffing this big engine into the same engine bay that you're putting a 5-liter engine in, a 5-liter V8 in it. Probably the best during this era is probably E-Class again. It's just Mercedes does a great job. I think they build everything around the E-Class. The C-Class and the E-Class, or the C-Class and the S-Class, take their design elements from there. But I think a lot of in the 90s era, it was all about the styling of looking like making the E-Class look like the S-Class or vice versa. The S-Class, the front ends, and the E-Class and the S-Class during this time period, the front ends look great. The ML came out in 99 or 98. I'd probably stay away from them in the early years, except for the fact that they really did great, in the all-wheel drive function in the 4MATIC. And also in the E-Class during this time period, you also had the 4MATIC coming out in the late 90s as well. All right, so now we're into the 80s, and this one is going to be W123, the 300D Turbo, and then the W126. This is really, this was Mercedes then. And as you know, I've got 3 W126s. The 560 SEL by far is probably the best value to buy today, except it's going to cost you more. The diesel, by all means, W123 with the diesel engine and the W126 with the diesel engine. Best, probably in my opinion, the best era for Mercedes-Benz as far as durability, quality, construction, safety, the whole gamut. The only things that were problematic back in the 80s was the instrument cluster, the plastic gears in the speedometer and the odometer. They tend to crack right from the center pin outward, and typically I've put one together by just super gluing it, squeezing it, and it's held for years. You can buy the kits; they're cheap; they're $20 or less. Cars are, the suspension parts for the W126 long body 560, because the rear suspension is self-leveling hydraulic, very expensive. And in fact, I'm faced with that challenge on my W126. I've got a couple bushings that apparently have worn out. The shocks are fine because my wife and I and my daughter and Jose, we went to dinner one evening and we took the W126. So I had 2 passengers in the back seat, so it was able to lift up and level the car. When we got home, the car was finally sitting upwards a little bit. So I don't know if the bushings are bad or if it was just bottoming out because I haven't had any weight in the trunk to raise it up. So I'll look at that a little bit closer. So in that era, I'm going to lean again, probably to the best of the best of the best in this area is actually the W123. But there were millions and millions and millions of them made, and right now, if you're looking for a diesel in the 123, you're going to pay a premium. If you're looking for a diesel in the W126, you're going to pay a premium because those are bulletproof engines. Those are 500,000-mile engines, and I would venture to say that that's the best. Now, going back into the 70s era, again, you have a 123 in this era, and you also have the 116. This era, rusting. Lots and lots and lots of rust. Lots of rust right behind the wheel, or the rear wheels. More so on the 116 than on the 123. And you also have the tail end of the W108s. The W108s are getting big notoriety if you have them, especially in the long wheelbase. They're becoming very valuable. This one probably isn't yet because it's got some paint issues, and I'm still putting things back together and door seals and things like that. But people like the looks of these because this is the styling. Once it changed from the 108 to the 116, then from that era, from the 116 through the 140, you had kind of the same front end look and the same rear look. That became a Mercedes staple for 20 some years. But these were good quality during their time, but the technology to make them better hadn't existed yet. So all metal parts, very little plastic parts. It's just, they're solid cars. They were probably one of the safer cars during that time period. But I would venture to say the 123 would be the best during the, because when it came out in the mid 70s, the 123 is probably the better value. And I just think that they were, they were just good cars. They're mid-size for that time period. But, if you had 123, a lot of times, in the United States, you had a 123 in the 70s, you also had one of these or 116 sitting in the garage as well. So that's my take on the Mercedes automobile. There's a lot. Mercedes has a big model lineup now. You got the GLA, the GLB, the GLC, GLE, GLS, and it's SUVs. Everything is all about SUVs today. But I think, the car, if you wanted a car, I would look at E-Class, and you would probably be happy for a very, very long time. S-Class, if you're going to buy new, buy an E-Class. If you're going to buy used, buy an E-Class. And unless you can get a good deal on a W221, 222, those cars will be, they're coming down in price because they're hitting their bottom cycle before they start to come back up. Because, everything with Mercedes-Benz has been kind of a cyclical. 10 years ago, you get a W123 with a diesel engine in it for $2,000 in reasonably decent shape. You may have to throw a paint job on it. Today, finding a good under 200,000 mile W123 with a diesel engine in it, you're going to pay anywhere north of $5,500 ish. If it's got reasonable paint on it, you may be closer to $7,000, and that's one that's got north of 200,000 miles on it with a decent paint job on it. So, and the interior is not all trashed up. So there it is, folks. Nothing, no scripts, nothing to read from. My personal opinions on the Mercedes lineup and what I believe the consumer should have if they want to enter into the Mercedes. If you've never owned a Mercedes-Benz, start with a little E350 or a C350. See how you like it. It'll surprise you. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. If you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe, share this with your friends, and if you have any questions or comments, put them down below and I will respond. Thank you.